Welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum. I'm your host for today, and this is episode 19 of the Student Ministry Podcast, and I am so grateful for you to jump in and into another conversation with us. Today, we're going to be talking to Ronald Long, who is the student minister to middle school students at Wayside Chapel in San Antonio, Texas. And Ronald's been working with middle school students for a long time there. He's been, really honing what God is doing there in San Antonio. And I know that you're going to learn a lot from him, especially if you work with middle school students, either primarily or as a part of your ministry to middle school and high school students. Today, you're going to be blessed by this conversation and some tips that he shares on how he does it there in San Antonio. But before we jump into that conversation, we want to thank our sponsor for today's podcast. Our sponsor is WorkCamp NE. Their website is WorkCampNE.com. And if you are looking for a mission trip opportunity, a service-based mission trip where it's all about pouring into the residents who really need some home repair with your students and really connecting with other youth groups that are also doing the same thing, definitely check out WorkCamp NE and their website at WorkCampNE.com. They've been a longtime sponsor of this podcast, and we're so grateful for what they do there in New England, but they've also started expanding out. So even though they are WorkCamp Northeast, they're actually have expanded this year. They went to Illinois for the first time, and I'm pretty sure they're going to be going back to Illinois in 2018 too. So 2 different opportunities, maybe in New England or also in Illinois. So make sure you check out their website. It's been an awesome opportunity for my past students to just really pour in to the ministry there with WorkCamp. And I'm looking forward to continuing to work with them over the years. And also, I'm so grateful for their sponsorship of the podcast. And now let's get into that conversation with Ronald Long. Like I said, Ronald is a longtime middle school minister. He's been working with these students for a long time, loves what he does. And if you work with middle school students, you're going to be blessed by this conversation today. I know it. And in fact, if you know someone else that also works with middle school students, make sure you go ahead and share this with them. You can do that on iTunes and Stitcher and all those different ways that you can listen to podcasts, and just share it through social media and all that different stuff. But if you hear something you like today, make sure you do share it, but also your positive reviews also really help us out. So make sure you leave a positive review. That'd be awesome. It just helps the Student Ministry Podcast raise up on all the charts and everything. And so more people can find it and also hear these amazing stories about student ministry all around the world. So thanks again. And let's jump into this conversation with Ronald Long. Thanks so much for joining us today, Ronald.
Steve, it's awesome. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, I've known you for a little bit, not too terribly long. And we met at the DYM 100 last year.
Best conference on the planet.
It is the best conference. So I think they're all filled up for this year. But if you haven't, if they ended up doing it another time, make sure you sign up for that for sure. Ronald, just take some time as we start here to kind of tell the podcast audience a little bit about who you are and what's God been doing in your life to kind of bring you to the point where you are today.
I am one of those rare pastors who is a pastor's kid. I actually don't know if that's like the most rare thing on the planet, but I feel like it is. So my dad was a pastor, church planter, worked with the Alabama State Convention. I've got grew up in Alabama, have 2 brothers, a twin who looks nothing like me, and an older brother who looks a lot more like me, and got into youth ministry, felt like youth ministry was my thing, like most guys in high school, around my junior year of high school. And it's because I was super involved in youth ministry, super involved with my church, with my school, what we were doing there. And so because I really had no other direction in my life, like, hey, this is really what I want to do with the rest of my life. It's like, well, youth ministry sounds pretty cool. And I'm sure, I know God used that very immature, this is the direction I should go, because I don't know of anything else to steer me really where he did want me to head in. Graduated high school and found a really small Southern Baptist university called Union University.
Okay.
Love the school, met my wife there. We've been, this August will be 10 years we've been married. And when I was at that school, I was a part of several guys who were kind of in the same boat as me saying, yeah, student ministry is the thing. God's called me into student ministry. We were really involved in our student ministry back, in our hometowns, and now let's do student ministry together. And we all kind of started volunteering for student ministry things, like the typical college kid leading a D now as a small group leader, going and helping chaperone different trips that people were doing, or going to be a part of the student ministries that were around Jackson, Tennessee, where we were living at. And the more we volunteered for student ministry things, the more those other guys started kind of falling away. And they were like, yeah, no, it's not student ministry. Like now that I'm like in a leadership part, or like having to like not just do the fun stuff, like, no, that's actually not student ministry. Yeah. And so they all those guys who I was serving with are doing ministry in some capacity, one form or another now. But the more I did student ministry, the more I found myself burdened for students and enjoyed really their growing, the transition process, the learning new things, having their eyes open to biblical truths part. And so the more I volunteered, the more I got burdened and wanted to do it more. And so by the time we actually graduated, I was the only one of those guys who graduated strict youth ministry. Like everybody else was doing, saying, eventually I'm going to be a senior pastor. I'll do student ministry for a little while, if it gets my foot in the door to a church. Yep. But that's not the end goal. For me, student ministry has always been the end goal.
Cool.
And so college was a really neat time of fleshing out my calling that I've been getting validated, I guess, by God, and saying, no, these feelings aren't going away. Like student ministry is where I'm supposed to serve and be at.
Cool.
And college, was a really cool place for me as well, because I had my crisis of faith, like junior year, like, oh no, what if this is all made up and I'm going to give my life to this thing and I don't, and it's not all true, and kind of coming to reconciliation and going, no, I believe the gospel. I believe the words of Christ. Jesus was a real person. And if he was a real person, the rest of the Bible makes sense. And so really being convicted in that. And then leading into my first student ministry position at the stupid age of 21, where I felt like I knew all the answers and was just going to like rock the very first church I ever got a part of. I knew how to do youth ministry the best way, and they were just going to get behind me and we were going to rock the world. And I learned a lot through that time, especially a lot about humility. And when my ideas aren't the best ideas, especially when my ideas don't fit the culture. And those youth my pastor, the youth volunteers, those people were extremely gracious with me, and kind of gave me the ability to fail forward a lot.
Cool.
And there was a lot of shaping, a lot of changing, and me understanding what youth ministry is, what it looks like practically, and which was extremely helpful for me as I went to seminary. To be in student ministry, because I would be looking at these other places and going, okay, we'd be talking about these scenarios in class, and other guys who were well-meaning but had the same mentality I had, a couple years back, were like, oh, I would just walk into that church and do this and totally fix up the place. And me and the other full-time guys were like, yeah, you're going to last 2 weeks if you kind of have that mentality. And so God really used my own pride to shape me and to cause me to reevaluate some things. And the first church that I worked at, I stayed there for 6 years, and I love those people. I love that church, but I'm really surprised they like made it through me and like survived for the first couple of years, because it was rough. But learned a lot during that church, and learned a lot with those people. And so I'm very thankful for them. But in that time, like I said, I met my wife. We got married 10 years ago this August. We had 2 kids, 2 girls, and we're just kind of learning what it meant to be in a ministry and also have a family and kind of learn what that balance looked like and what it would mean for us. And somewhere along the way, God allowed me to speak through Fuge Camps, which is a organization that's near and dear to my heart. That was one of my, I guess, figuring out my calling, was serving a couple summers with Fuge as a Bible study leader, and had a blast there. And again, was just affirming, yes, student ministry is where you're supposed to serve. You love these students. You want to pour into these students. I got a chance to actually be a camp pastor for a couple summers.
Oh, cool.
And kind of like drop into a location, do a week of camp, and then come back to ministry, which was a really neat experience doing that. But the very first time that I did, I actually found myself at Houston Baptist University and was there, and this church said, "Hey, we are looking for a middle school pastor. Ronald, we've been hanging out with you all week. Would you possibly consider being our middle school pastor?"
Wow.
And I can definitely see how God was pulling my heart towards middle school ministry during that time, because where I was serving, we were at that point where we were just big enough where it made sense to split up the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. And I wanted to do that because I saw the big difference between, at that point, a seventh grader and a 12th grader.
Yep.
And seeing the huge differences of, and I guess the advantages of splitting them up and teaching more towards the 7th and 8th grade in one setting, and then the freshmen through the seniors in another setting, and was trying to do that, but got tons of pushback from parents. So, okay. But again, that was their culture, that youth ministry is all together, everybody together. That was the culture. That's fine. But I had been thinking through lots of middle school ministry. And so that's where I now ended up. So I'm in San Antonio, Texas right now, serving, this September will be the start of my 4th year at Wayside Chapel as their middle school pastor. So I'm beginning my decade, right? I'm beginning my the beginning of my 2nd decade of student ministry. Would love to serve for 3. Should the Lord let me be, the 30-year veteran, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But so right now in my current church, I am the middle school pastor, and I get a lot of man, you are really brave faces. When I tell people I'm a middle school pastor. No, so in my current context, I work with 6th through 8th grade. Okay. And so it's wild to be working with 11 to 14-year-olds. That's my age range. Yeah. Because there's a lot of time when I'm just, I guess what I talk about is there's a moment when I'm teaching kids how to grow up a little bit. And there's another time when I'm like holding back the teenager, going like, you're not quite ready for this thing. And so middle school ministry, from what I've been able to see, is I get these kids for 3 years, and I get to help them transition. Right.
Yeah.
Because I get we're promoting in 4 weeks, so it's really on my mind right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the incoming 6th grader, who is totally a kid, right? And by the time I'm done with them and they finish their 8th grade year and head into freshmen, they're full blown teenager at this point. Yep. They're thinking about their learner's permit, driving, and college is beginning to come into mind and all this kind of stuff. But I get them for the in-between, right, for the transition time. And that is exciting to me. It's really cool. I love working with middle schoolers. They are authentically awkward. Like, they don't know they're being awkward sometimes. And you for a lot of times you just get like these hilarious responses to questions, or even just like they blurt it out without meaning to. I'm like, dude, when your frontal lobe reconnects later on in life, you're going to look back and be like, why did people put up with me? But no, it's a fantastic time just to watch them grow. And for some of these guys, for the guys, I'm just like teaching them how to actually shake a hand and being like, hey man, don't give me the limp fish. This is how you shake a dude's hand. Like, look at my eyes, right? Like, so, okay, here, check it out. Shake my hand, look at my eyes. Okay, there you go. That's a handshake. Now, what was your question? Like, what was that thing you needed?
Right.
Or for for the girls, just trying to get them connected with a small group leader and just be like, look, can you go tell this girl over here she's wearing a skirt? She needs to be cognizant of the fact that she's wearing a skirt because she has forgotten. And it's, it's just that growing up and that transition, because it is all in transition right here. And I just absolutely love it.
That's awesome.
And how it works out. It's super cool. And I do feel brave sometimes, but it's just a really neat ministry working with middle schoolers and middle schoolers only. It's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of people have always asked me, because in my very first, well, I won't say my first ministry, but I guess my second ministry, I was over middle school only and loved it and got the same kind of comments. But since then, I've been over middle school and high school for the last 10 plus years, and a lot of people ask me, like, what do you like better? And it's really hard for me to say, because I like each age group for different reasons, and I love middle school for those reasons that you're talking about. It's such an important age. So many transitions are happening then, and they're coming to their own. And the stats all say, if like the majority of Christians will accept Jesus during their middle school time, and if they don't, the chances of them accepting Jesus goes down considerably as they get older. So if we can really reach middle schoolers during that time, I mean, we're setting them up for just an awesome life with Christ.
Oh yeah, totally. But it is funny to watch them again, like in our promotion season, like to watch the freshmen chill out. Because it happens like instantaneously.
Yeah.
Like 1 week they move up and they're kind of like, woo, we're still kind of crazy. And then like the next week they're like, hey man, what's up?
Yeah,
I'm cool now. I'm in high school.
That's awesome. So talk about a little bit what your ministry looks like on a regular basis there at Wayside Chapel, and how do you specifically reach the teenagers there, the middle schoolers, and what do things look like on a regular basis in your ministry?
Sure. So we've got two main times that we meet. Like a lot of churches, we do Sunday morning and we do Wednesday night. Wednesday night looks different depending on the season that we're in, the time of year. Sunday morning goes year round. So in my previous church, we were the Sunday school model, where that was your main small group discipleship happens on Sunday mornings. And then Wednesday night was really your outreach, large group. And when I moved to Wayside Chapel, they had flip-flopped that, which was a really big change for me. I know tons of churches do this, but it was a big change for me coming from a Southern Baptist background into this new church, new setting. So Sunday morning is our large group.
Okay.
It's me in the room with a ton of middle schoolers who, if they ever decided to turn on us, the ratio would be in their favor. That's just, and they would totally own us, but they don't realize they could take over, which is good because they would. And so our Sunday morning is tons of middle schoolers serving, which is another thing that I can't say enough about with our church, is that they really want middle schoolers to serve. And so I'll get on that in a little bit. But middle schoolers are the ones who run our sound, run our lights, who set up in the morning. They are the entirety of the band. I don't have, college leader up there with a guitar, keeping everybody on key and on rhythm. Like, it's all middle schoolers.
Wow.
It's really cool to see them take over, because they're just using their gifts. They're using the talent God has given them, and they're rocking. And so sometimes it really does sound like we have a middle school band because you go, oh, these are all middle schoolers. Like, it sounds like that right now.
Yeah.
But there are other times when you're just looking up there and going like, man, these kids are rocking it.
That's awesome.
High school pastor makes fun of me all the time because as middle school ministry, they do things better in packs of people. So like sometimes we have like a middle school choir because we don't have like one singer up there. That'd be terrifying. So we have like
right.
Sometimes he'll come in, eight's the exaggeration. Most of the time we have like four singers up there.
Okay.
And it's just because, they feel better that way. They actually sing louder when there are more of them.
Yep.
So it's great. And so Sunday morning is our large group time. And that involves, games that we play and me, and like the teaching time where it is me teaching. And I'm a very interactive teacher. We've got a big enough group, like I said, to need to be split off in middle schoolers, but it's not so large that we can't like throw out questions and really get answers. So I really like to teach with questions and get responses and talk to them and be, going back and forth with them and keeping the time that I'm actually lecturing them very small, so that they don't have to just sit there and stare at me.
Cool.
Because nobody wants to do that, let's be honest. And so the teaching time that we have, I split it up into 3 main areas that I really want a middle schooler to get right, which is, hey, I want a middle schooler to know the gospel and be able to share the gospel. So a lot of our series will just be about, hey, this reinforces the gospel. Hey, this is how you share the gospel with somebody. Another area is about the attributes of God. I want them to know who they're worshiping, and I want them to get, this is who God is. This is what God has done for you. This is what God is like, and that's fleshed out through the New Testament, the Old Testament stories, and things like that. And I want them to really nail down relationships. And I use relationships kind of paint a broad stroke, like relationships between friends, relationships between authority figures like mom and dad, teachers. And then we actually spend a very small amount of time talking about relationships as in dating, because I love this, and I often take pictures of it just to prove the point. My middle schoolers sit boys on the left, girls on the right. Yeah. I don't make them do this. Yeah. Like, they just do this to themselves. Like, we have one aisle, and boys are on one side and girls on the other. It's hilarious. That goes away the moment they transition to high school. Like, it's like a change. But in the middle school ministry, boys on the left, girls on the right, and it cracks me up. So we spend some time doing that. Oh, and there's actually one more. It's 4 that we focus on. It's spiritual disciplines.
Okay.
And so we say, hey, I want you to know how to pray. I want you to know how to study the Bible. I want you to know how to serve, to know how to give. And I want you to know how to basically take control of your own faith. Cool. And say, this is my faith, and I want to give them the tools that they need to continue on their spiritual journey. And if I can get those 4 things right, and set up by the time they get into high school and kind of get that drilled into their head, I feel like I really would have done my job as middle school pastor and preparing them for that next step.
Cool. So did you, is that something that you were inspired by from someone else, or is that something that God kind of just laid on your heart to set it up that way?
I've always been a method person. So like, I want the method, and I've done a lot of different things with Lifeway or with Andy Stanley, his 7 points and these things. And they've always kind of said, hey, this is the direction we're going in. At my current church, it's me who's coming up with the curriculum. Mm-hmm. So I knew that I wanted to have a system to where I said, this is what I'm going for.
Yeah.
And so that was the system where I said, hey, as a middle schooler, what would I want them to know by the time they get into high school? And I think those 4 things are just huge. Cool. The gospel, knowing who God is, having spiritual disciplines in their life, and then also being able to navigate the areas of all relationships, because if they get those 4 things set, then I feel like they can continue to grow in their Christian walk and continue to face high school in a pretty prepared way.
Yeah. That totally makes sense.
And then our Wednesday night is really cool. I can take no credit for this whatsoever, because it was a system that was in place when I got there. During the school year, we have small groups, and that's when we're all split up, 6th grade all the way up to 12th grade. Guys on one side, girls on the other, kind of deal, in small groups with 2 leaders apiece. It's a fantastic model, to where no one leader feels like they have to be there every week, or if life comes up, that, hey, I've got my co-leader over here, I'm good.
Yep.
But we only meet for 10 weeks in the fall and 14 weeks in the spring. We give them a little bit of time to get into school and to get them going. We give them a break for Christmas. We get started again a couple weeks after Christmas is over, and we go for 14 weeks in the spring. And we actually quit right before finals take over, and everybody would not be showing up anyways. So we're very intentional with our small groups to say, hey, these are the weeks. This is when we meet. This is what we do. And we make it a big deal and say, hey, you want discipleship, you want somebody pouring into your life, this is what it looks like, and this is when we have it during these weeks in the fall and in the spring. During the summer, we don't cancel. Like I said, we do take those breaks. In the summer, we do more of our outreach fun stuff. And so this last week, we had a movie night at one of our multi-site locations. They have a big gym, and so we just played Lego Batman on the movies and said, hey, invite your friends. We had slushies and popcorn. And then, this next week we're going to a trampoline park. So summer is our outreach time, because what we want to encourage students to do is, say, hey, on Wednesday nights, invite your friends, especially those who aren't connected to a church, to come and do something fun with us. And then when our small groups start back up again, we say, hey guys, invite those same kids and those same friends back to church so that they can hang out with the same students they've already been hanging out with, and then get into small group Bible study with them. And so we really try to make that very intentional. Say, hey, invite your friends on Wednesday nights during the same time that we normally meet during the school year. And then say, hey, when school year starts back up, find those same friends, invite them to come hang out during small group Bible study.
Cool.
It's been a really neat model to watch.
Yeah.
It's been really
I bet it sounds like it's a cool thing too, because you're keeping that consistency up, which I think is really important for that middle school age, that they're learning how to get in routines, that it's the actual program is changing up, but it's always the same day, same time, so that they can get used to that. And, even when they're inviting their friends, they're like, oh, it's the same day, same time that you normally came.
Yeah, we're used to it. Cool. And then the last thing that's again, I take no credit for, it's all my church, is they allow, once you turn 6th grade, you can serve in any capacity at our church.
Cool.
So 6th graders can take up the offering. 6th graders can work in the nursery with the kids. 6th graders can be a part of discipleship ministry for the children that we've got on Sunday morning. 6th graders can serve in our little coffee shop. 6th graders can work the sound booth in main service. And so really our church culture is not hey, what does our pastor say? Sit, soak, and sour. It's not that. It's say, hey, walk into a church building and you say, what can I do? Where can I help? And we really push that hard to say, hey, now that you're in 6th grade, it's time to step up, and it's time to serve someplace in the church.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's really cool to watch, again, because get these people who go, you're letting a 6th grader do what again? Yeah. And it's like, no, man, they're a crew guide for VBS. They got this. And so it's really neat to watch them step up and do that stuff, because we're saying, hey, you can handle this. Right. And then they go, okay, I can handle this. And they get up there and they do it. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm assuming you're probably seeing a lot of those students really stay with the church and stay with their faith a lot longer, because that's what I've witnessed. The more we get those teenagers involved, there's buy-in a lot earlier on. They start to love the church, not only love God, but to love his church, because they're able to use their gifts and serving at a young age. There's one in particular guy now, he's like in his 20s, but when I was at my last church, he was running sound, I think, as a 7th grader for main service. And he is still plugged in and just doing everything he can for the church, and like donating as much time as he can now in his 20s, and loves the church because the church gave him an opportunity to serve and use his gifts even as a 7th grader.
Oh, yeah. And it's just it's showing them, hey, when you walk into a church as a college student that you're unfamiliar with, rather than say, hey, what can this church do for me, fill my needs, we're teaching them that you walk into that church and you go, hey, what do you guys need help with? Yeah. How can I serve? How can I be a part of this body? Because I know so many, going to a small Baptist college, there were so many of us who were trained. What do? You go to church. Yep. You sit in the pew, and that's what you do. Like, that's what church is like. Mm-hmm. And so we're training them to say, no, when you go to a church, you walk right up to the Welcome Center and go, hey, where can I start volunteering? Where can I serve? Because that's what you do in church. Yeah. And so it's really cool to watch that. So that, hopefully starting at 6th grade, we are putting that into their culture so that they know, hey, when they graduate and they go find a church as a college student, they're ready. They know what to do, and they know how to be a part of Church Big C. So It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've shared some great insight already, but Now let's talk about other tips maybe that you've learned along the way that maybe you'd be able to take, yourself, if there was, a magical way of going back in time 10 years or something and say, okay, Ronald of 10 years ago, you're starting out in ministry 15 years ago or so. And you're like, these are some things you've learned today that you wish you would have known then, that you'd like to share with other youth leaders out there. Maybe 2 or 3 tips that really come to your mind that would be very helpful for others to hear.
Sure. For me, I think the first thing that I think about is parents. When I was going through seminary, everybody was talking, hey, parent ministry, it's got to be parent ministry. And, they're kind of fighting against no, it's got to be youth ministry. And I remember thinking through these things, do we have to be at odds with each other?
Yeah.
This is a false dichotomy. We don't need this, for the fight against each other. Because the youth ministry side would argue, hey, there are going to be kids who don't have any parental influence at home. Their parents aren't believers. They don't care. And so youth ministry is all that kid's going to get. Well, that's valid. There is that kid there.
Yep.
And there's the other side that goes, but parents are the primary disciplers of their students. And, what we're doing is we're stealing time from them. And we're basically telling them all they have to do is drop their kid off. And by the time they graduate high school, we'll make them model Christians. That's our job. We're the professionals here. And my convictions, especially since stepping into middle school, where parents are still really involved in their kids' lives, is to say we've got to do this thing together. And so what we do is we really try to, and as much as we possibly can, partner with parents. And I guess that really kind of fleshes itself out in a couple different ways. We have 3 parent meetings a year. One of them is our fall parent meeting. It's our biggest one, where we say, hey, new parents, your 6th grader just promoted up. Here's what we're doing. Here's what middle school ministry looks like. I tell them about, like I said, my 4 teaching aims, what I try to do in Sunday morning. But I also say, hey, I want you guys to sign up for the email list, because that's a primary way to communicate with you. But also, every Monday, I email you guys and say, hey, this is what I taught on Sunday. Here is the scripture, but here are some follow-up questions for you to ask your kid. And I sell it to them like this, hey, you're driving down the road, you're taking them from school to soccer practice, or you're shoving Subway into your mouth just to get some type of luncheon. Man, that's the time where you can say, you've got your kid, you've got a captive audience. Say, hey, Ronald said on this last Sunday, you talked about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And just run through boom, 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 those 5 questions. You as parent, that's your opportunity to piggyback off what I've done as far as study, as far as, putting it into their kid's mind and getting them really thinking about this stuff. That's your chance as a parent to piggyback off my work and then say, hey, I'm going to continue this conversation. I'm going to continue to disciple my kid. And that way, we're not trying to teach 18 different things all at once. We can say, hey, here's our one thing we can teach.
Yeah.
And so every week I email parents to say, this is what we talked about. This is what it was. Here are the follow-ups. This is what we did. And hopefully the goal with that is to say, talk to your kid about faith. This is huge. This is important. And just ask these questions. I've already started the conversation. You get a chance to continue it. But not just that, also using parents in ministry and in all parts of ministry as leaders, as small group leaders, as chaperones. There's the one type of, at one time I was going, hey, I don't want parents around too much. They scare me. They're kind of weird, and overprotective, all that stuff. And so I don't want parents really around. What I want is lots of college students and guys who are young and, people who are excited and all this stuff. I'm now seeing the value of using parents in ministry because they are invested. These are their kids, and they are going to care about the student ministry. They're going to be passionate about it because it impacts their kids. I was just talking with my wife about this the other day. During my first decade in ministry, it was I am literally the age of some of these parents' children. And that's weird because they're going, it's just a kid, just a guy who doesn't know what he's talking about. And to some extent they were right. It didn't. Now we're moving into second decade where I was kind of looking around us and our peers and going, man, we're moving into that time frame where we're going to be ministering to kids whose parents are our age.
Yeah.
Right. And so this year started that trend of people who are in my wife's Sunday morning Bible study are the ones who are sending their kids in the middle school. And so we're like, oh man, we're like in the same age bracket.
These are my peers now. Wow.
Yeah. So now these are my peers. That last one's going to be weird when I'm older than the parents sending their kids in the ministry. That's going to be fantastic. Looking forward to that. But right now, this is the decade we're moving into. And so using parents, I think, is huge. Now, I do make the caveat that, hey, parent, I'd love to have you serve in student ministry, but let's not have you be your kid's small group leader. Let's have you, if your kid's the dude, dad, let's have you serve, at a grade under or a grade above, or, mom, if you want to serve and your son's in the ministry, let's make sure there's some separation here.
Yeah.
Just so their kid can have some space to be themselves, but I don't shy away from involving parents like I used to. That's definitely tip number one.
Awesome.
Tip number two would be find those older people who love students and kids and use them in your ministry. So not just parents. I'm talking grandparents. Because I had a guy go with me on a mission trip this last week, and I am the age of his oldest kid, but he's got his youngest is in the youth ministry. He's a sixth grader now. His kids are really spread out, but dude just has a heart for students. And all the young people in his peer group, they are grandparents. They are papas, right? But these are guys who love kids, who have seen things in their life, can speak into these kids' lives. And some of them, they're retired. They've got a ridiculous amount of free time.
Yeah.
And they are really thinking through, man, what's my legacy going to be? What are people going to remember me for? And I got to see this my very first year of student ministry, and I should have continued this, but I didn't. Miss Gale was the 7th grade girls Bible study leader at my first church, Miss Gale. And she was in her 16th year of being the 7th grade girls Bible study leader.
Wow.
And grandma at this point, but she loved kids, and those 7th grade girls loved her. And I should have seen the value at that moment of going, hey, retiree, you've got a ton of time. You're looking for your legacy. What's that going to be? What are you going to leave behind? Man, minister to students. Fall in here. You don't have to be young to do student ministry. You just have to love students.
Yeah.
And so really, really pouring into and finding those retirees who have the time, and showing them that they, take away the scary parts for them, kind of peel it back and say, hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to make it.
Yeah.
But really plug into them.
That's awesome. There's actually two ladies that as I was transitioning out of my last ministry, they came up to me and said they're both interested in joining in middle school ministry and helping out with this coming school year. And they're both retired age, and I was secretly jealous for the ongoing ministry there, because I was stepping out and I was like, man, I've been working on these trying to get some elderly people in for a long time. They're finally stepping in as I'm leaving. What's going on in this? So,
yeah. It's not fair.
Yeah. But that's great.
No, definitely that. And probably the last thing is, again, the thing that I can't take credit for, but the seasons and the breaks that our current ministry takes. There's a solid 5 weeks in between Wednesday night small groups getting over and summer activities starting. And that season is so helpful to idea plan, to take a break and relax, to get to see my family on a Wednesday night for once. And that's already planned in there for me. We don't do that enough, and just take season breaks. And so doing that here at this church has been fantastic. We only meet 50 weeks out of the year on Sunday morning, right? So we take two weeks break. So the high school pastor and I are kind of figuring out, hey, are there other seasons where we might not potentially meet, but Sunday morning is a little bit more of a guarded time. And so we're trying to figure that one out. But Wednesday nights, I'm just so glad and thankful for the breaks that we take. We're coming up on our last Wednesday night activity. It's this Wednesday. We won't meet again after this next Wednesday until September 17th.
Cool.
So we take effectively like the entire month of August and first 2 weeks of September off. And we do that on purpose. We want people to get pumped for Wednesday night because they haven't been to Wednesday night in a while, because, oh man, I'm so excited. It's starting back up again. That's a valuable feeling rather than, oh, okay, last week we did this.
Right.
Next week, our small groups. It's the exact same thing. And so the value in getting them excited because something hasn't been offered for a while, that's been huge. And again, I take no credit for that. That was not my idea. But having been in this ministry where that's a part of the culture, I can definitely see the value in that and what they do with that. So having that break, that moment where everybody can kind of just get away from each other for a second and get away from the normal and then kind of build up and go, hey, small groups are coming. We call it reverb. Reverb's coming, guys. Like, get excited.
Cool.
They do get excited for it, are ready for it. And so it's really cool. And I'm definitely glad that we do it that way.
Cool. I forgot to ask this earlier, but what's the content of your small groups? Is that everybody on the same page, or they kind of go in different directions, or how does that go?
So no, our small groups is a curriculum that I've written, and it does deal with those four areas that I was talking about: relationships, gospel, attributes of God, and spiritual disciplines. It deals with those four areas. But 6th grade does a curriculum, 7th grade does a curriculum, 8th grade does a curriculum, and they kind of all cover those four things still at the same time. But we take it in stride. Probably the coolest thing that we do that I am really a big fan of is in 8th grade, they look at the gospel through the lens of Hosea.
Oh, okay.
And we save that for 8th grade because, talking about prostitutes and things like that. But also, a lot of our kids have accepted Christ by the 8th grade. And so gospel in some sense is old hat to them. I want them to see it in new ways, and fresh. And that's a way they get to see it in a new and fresh way.
Cool.
Looking through the Hosea. So yeah, small groups are different than Sunday mornings. I've toyed with the idea of, hey, do our small groups look a lot like what Sunday mornings look like? Or is it the same kind of teaching stuff, or is it the same text? We just haven't really found a way to make that work, again, with the breaks that we do and everything like that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Ronald, I know I'm going to probably be talking to you again sometime soon because, like I said, I think listeners of the podcast know that I'm just now stepping into a new ministry and a new season, and we're kind of trying to figure out what it looks like and trying to shift some programming around at this new church. And one of the things we're thinking about doing is doing Sunday morning and midweek thing, and what's that going to look like? So I'll be talking to you more, but I'm sure other people are going to want to talk to you a little more too and connect with you. Where's the best place for people to do that online?
Sure. Probably the best place is Twitter, finding me on there. I used to have a blog. I'm not cool anymore. I let my blog die for a little bit. I might bring it back up at some point, but at Ronald_Long is my Twitter. Find me on there. There aren't very many Ronald Longs on Facebook, but feel free to find me on Facebook as well. I know you've got your cool little handle on Facebook. Let me try to look that up here just super quick, because I am that old school. I am the guy who is on Facebook. Twitter is cool. I use that, but in all reality, I'm a Facebook guy.
Yeah.
I'm just that old.
Well, I've noticed that like it's really the best platform to connect with parents.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's Ronald.long.10. That's me.
Okay.
So Facebook.com, Ronald.long.10. Apparently there are 10 other Ronald Longs at least on Facebook out there.
All right. You got to find the right one.
Yeah, man.
And I know you write some, so you're going to plug your books a little bit.
I do. So in my spare time, which is minimal, I write nerdy fantasy novels. That's a lot of fun. That's retrovertbooks.com. If anybody needs a quick fix for epic fantasy, retrovertbooks.com. RETROVERT books.com. Yeah. Found in current season, and I don't know if you've ever felt like this, Steve, like my previous church worked and didn't have any margin. In this new church, there's a lot more room for margin. And so I found a hobby, and that's writing nerd books, and it's a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I'm kind of hoping that I get a little more margin at this current ministry to kind of venture out a little more and do something like that.
Very cool. Oh, and if anybody wants to find my stuff, my youth ministry things, I've got some resources on downloadyouthministry.com. Definitely have some things on there. Find that stuff. I've got a couple of ebooks, some teaching series, maybe even a game or two in the future, but that's what I've got right now.
Cool. Yes, definitely check out Download Youth Ministry and look up Ronald stuff. And I actually had my first resources now published on DYM. So
sweet. What is
excited.
It?
It's a game I did called Animal Shuffle.
Way to go.
So yeah, or not Animal Shuffle, Animal Roundup. I don't even know what my own thing's called. Yeah, it's just it's a game about trying to guess the weird names of groups of animals. So what's a group of giraffes called, or what's a group of
that's
whatever
awesome.
Called. So yeah, so it's it's pretty fun. I got some other ones in the works. I just got to finish them up, and so we'll have 2 or 3 volumes eventually. And yeah,
very cool, man.
But Ronald's got a lot more stuff on than I do, so make sure you look his stuff up.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. And thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on.
It's my pleasure, Steve. Thanks for asking me to do it.
No problem. And may God bless your ministry.
Thanks, man.
Well, I hope you were blessed by that interview today with Ronald Long. I know I was, and I know I gained a lot of insight from hearing from his experience with middle school students and just reaching out to parents and how to structure programming. I know you're going to want to connect with him more, so make sure you check him out on Twitter and Facebook. And if you're into sci-fi, make sure you check out his books as well. But I want to let you know also that if you want to connect with us at the Student Ministry Podcast, you want to connect with me, make sure you check me out on Twitter at Steve Cullum. That's SteveCullum. That's probably the best way to check out what I'm talking about and new podcasts coming out and all that sort of thing when I'm writing on my blog and everything. Speaking of Twitter, though, the Student Ministry Podcast is now officially on Twitter, so you can follow at StuMinPod. So it's all abbreviated StuMinPod. And make sure you follow us on there. We'd like your input on how the podcast is going, especially if you've got someone that you're like, I want to get them on the podcast. They've got an amazing story about student ministry and what they're doing. Make sure you hit me up on Twitter, and we would love to get them on the podcast as well. Also, thanks so much to our sponsor for today's podcast, WorkCamp NE. Make sure you check out their website at workcampne.com. And they're also on Facebook and Twitter, so make sure you check out their social media. And above all, make sure you share this with other people, because it's the best way for us to get these stories out. These are amazing stories from amazing youth workers, and we want other people to hear these stories. It's why I do this podcast, honestly. I love hearing these stories, and I love sharing these stories with you. And so just a little help, share these stories with someone else that would enjoy it and would gain from the insight and the wisdom of these other youth workers. And that'd be awesome. And be sure to leave us a positive review as well if you like what you hear. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to today's podcast. We'll be back next month with another interview with another awesome student ministry worker. But until then, may God bless your ministry.